Go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Friday Night Locker Room live on Space Coast Daily TV. Steve Wilson, Orville Susong, coming to you from the Radisson out at the port. We want to welcome everybody to this morning, a Saturday edition, Steve, of the Friday Night Locker Room.
Yes, the Florida Historical Society has put on this event this morning. We're going to talk surfing from back in the day. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of familiar faces, some that I haven't seen in a long time. But we're going to show you this event live. It's going to be about an hour and 15 minutes, scheduled to start at 9 o'clock, which is just a few minutes away. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's called the Space Coast, and it's a Florida Surf Museum. And got a couple people up there. We know Bob Freeman is up there on the panel. Daryl Benton is up there. They've got 5 people that will be on the panel, and they're looking for a packed house here in this room this morning.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Dan Ryder earlier. He's going to tell us a little bit about exactly what you're going to see and what you're going to hear this morning. So here's Dan. Steve Wilson with the Friday Night Locker Room and Space Coast Daily TV. I'm joined by Dan Ryder, and Dan's going to tell us a little bit about what we're doing here today at the Radisson at the port.
So this is the Florida Historical Society's annual symposium, which is run every year. Lucky enough this year that we're doing it at the Cape. And as a part of this, we're doing a panel on the golden years of surfing history in Florida. It's an hour-long panel discussion. We're going to have some pretty cool speakers here, and should be fun.
You know, the golden years, that brings back a lot of fond memories. I know I'm excited to see what the people on the panel are going to talk a little bit about it. I understand there'll be a question and answer period at some point. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun in the next few minutes. Dan Ryder, thank you for joining us today, and let's have fun.
I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
That was Dan Ryder telling us a little bit about what you're going to see and what you're going to hear in just a few minutes.
Getting ready to get started here. They're waiting for a couple more people. The MC is, I'm told, out getting coffee. So it'll be just a minute. But on our panel, Steve, we've got John Hughes, Daryl Benton, Linda Grover, Bob Freeman, and Tony Sasso. That's the ones that will be up taking the questions this morning from the audience. And they've got a slide show that they're going to show some of the old pictures and stuff surfing the Space Coast. We have some more people coming in right now, so we'll be getting ready here in just a minute. But 5 people on the panel plus the MC, and that will be John Hughes from the Florida Surf Museum.
So we're going to take a real short break, and we will be back in 1 minute.
Erdman Automotive. Whether it is the Cadillac dealership in Merritt Island, the Toyota dealership, or Nissan dealership on State Road 520 in Cocoa, you are guaranteed to get the best deals from Erdman Automotive. New or pre-owned vehicles are in stock. The friendly staff are working hard to meet your every need. And the Erdman Automotive Service Department is second to none and will treat you like you want to be treated. That's Mike Erdman Nissan, Cadillac, and Toyota. Simply the best.
Hi, I'm Lulu. I'm CJ. I'm Maggie. And we're GFM. And you're watching Friday Night Locker Room on Space Coast Daily TV. Now back to the guys.
We are back live. Steve Wilson, Orville Susong, the Friday Night Locker Room and Space Coast Daily. The Radisson at the port. Orville, we're going to be talking surf in the old days.
Getting ready to get started here in just a little bit. The panel is up front. This Florida Surf Museum. Surfing the Space Coast will be the topic today, and we'll bring it all to you live. Waiting for the MC, I guess.
This event's scheduled to run about an hour and 15 minutes. We'll be cranking it up in the next minute or so, go to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10:15. Big night on the Space Coast last night, high school football in full swing. Friday Night Locker Rooms, Orville Susong, Chris Bonanno, and Caleb the cameraman Brown on the campus of Space Coast as we're just about set to get underway.
Well, let's start out by saying good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Great. Quite good? So this is surfing, so we're on surfer time, so just bear with us. We're gonna get started. We're gonna do this as kind of a conversation, and then towards the end, we're gonna have some questions and answers. So if you've got some thoughts, write them down and hang on to them in the last 20 minutes or so. We'll do the Q&A, okay? I want to start out by doing some introductions. My name is Tony Sasso. I'm on the board of the Florida Surf Museum and have been with it all the way back when it was the Cocoa Beach Surf Museum as director and now board member. And I want to just start out by introducing John Hughes, who's going to give us a little talk about some surfing history to kind of get us started. And John moved to Cocoa in 1954, and his dad took a position with, if you can remember this, Pan American World Services, opening up the first civilian contract at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And he worked there until 1975, and he also participated in all the manned space programs down there. They moved to Cocoa Beach, yay, Cocoa Beach, in 1963. Got his first surfboard at age 14, and John will probably explain some of this, or the others will, what a pop-out is, but it was a pop-out called a locked-in. And he bought it at the Missile Dive Center in Merritt Island. The dive shop back in those days also carried surfboards, and that one did too. The second board after that was a short board. About a year later, it was an 8.6 Lance Carson. So those of us who know surfing understand an 8.6 is not really a short board, but back then it was considered a short board. He lived, surfed in Cocoa Beach until about 1971, went to college for a while, and then followed his brother Gary to Kauai for a year. After that, he joined the Navy, and he got sent to Hawaii for a couple of years, where he qualified as a salvage diver, but he also got to surf every day, because that's what you do in Hawaii, of course. He was always assigned duty stations where he could surf. I didn't pull that off, John. I was in the Navy. I never got to surf spots. 1981, separated from the Navy, returned to college. 1991, moved back to this area, got a job at KSC, and he worked there for almost 20 years. And he's currently retired, lucky you, and he's the executive director of the Florida Surf Museum, John Hughes.
Okay, by way of kind of setting up this discussion we're going to have today, I'm going to give you a very brief history of Florida surfing. And to start off with this slide, the conventional history of surfing goes that Duke Kahanamoku, who was the father of surfing, probably the most famous Hawaiian who ever lived, came to the United States and introduced the United States and the world to surfing. He came here 2012, then again in 2016, because he was also an Olympic gold medalist in swimming, and among other things, introduced what's called the Australian crawl and revolutionized surfing or swimming as well. So the conventional wisdom is that Duke Kahanamoku introduced surfing to the United States, which is true, but kind of not really. Next slide. Actually, surfing was well established before the Duke even made it to the U.S. This is a postcard that Skip Funderburg up in North Carolina discovered that shows someone holding a surfboard in Wrightsville Beach in 1909, which was 3 years before the Duke ever came here. And by the 20s, surfing was well established all up and down the East Coast, including Daytona Beach, Miami, and Wrightsville was one of the early areas. So that was before most people even realized that surfing started. Next slide. So at the same time, surfing was becoming established in Florida. Miami was kind of the center of surfing at the time. There's numerous articles, newspapers.com, which is just an awesome website, showing surfing was very popular, not just a fad, but a number of people doing it. In fact, you can see this one entry from the Daytona Gazette News from 1909. Eugene Johnson's recent constructed what's called a surfboard. He and his wife had fine sport at the beach last Thursday afternoon riding the waves. This is in 1909. So surfing was well known early. I'm not sure if the people previously thought. Okay, next slide, please. So by the 30s, surfing was popular all over down Florida on both the east and the west coast. Miami Beach was kind of the center of surfing at the time, and that was in large part because of an amazing family called the Whitmans, who, among their many accomplishments, surfing was only a small part, but they revolutionized surfing in Florida and actually started developing or improving on these early hollow boards that had been introduced and took them to Hawaii. The Hawaiians were so impressed that they gave them membership into the Outrigger Club, Outrigger Canoe Club, which was previously only for Hawaiians. So they were well respected. And they came back to Florida and started surfing. And this picture here is actually in Daytona Beach. One of the things that surfers do is always look for better waves. Waves weren't that good in Miami, so they started traveling up the coast, and they took a liking to Daytona Beach and went there often. And this is actually from the 1938 Florida Surfing Championships in Daytona Beach. And the Whitman brothers, Bill and Dudley and Stanley Whitman, were all part of this crew. So this is in the 30s, and Daytona Beach was the hot spot. In fact, there's a book called Surfing Florida by Paul Aho, where he states that during that period of time, there were at least 50 of these hollow surfboards built in high school wood shops in Daytona Beach alone. And this was also going on in Pensacola Beach, was another area, Jacksonville, the West Coast of Florida had surfing going on. And so it was really starting to get very popular. And then World War II happened. World War II came about. All of a sudden, everybody that might have wanted to surf was drafted. And Germans came to the coast and were sinking ships right and left, up and down the coast. So surfing didn't actually disappear, but it took a long nap. Next, please. So after the war, people started coming back, a lot of surfsmen and younger people, they started surfing, but it was still kind of sparse. But then there's a number of things that happened all at one time, and particularly affected this area. Number one was Gidget came out. So Gidget came out, and people suddenly learned about surfing because Gidget turned into Beach Blanket Bingo, which began all the amazingly dumb surf films that captured everybody's imagination. And all of a sudden, surfing was a nationwide fest. And then even add more fuel to the fire, the movie The Endless Summer came out, the most famous surfing movie ever, and it just took an already amazing fad and it just boosted up even more. And all this came to Cocoa Beach. And to top all that off, Cocoa Beach, which was once a sleepy little beach town with just a few dozen people in here, suddenly became the center of the space race. So what was just a few cottages in the 50s turned into a town of 15,000. It was inundated with scientists, technicians, engineers, mechanics, and they were all pretty young for the most part, and they had families, and the kids were young, and they all moved here. They were all just about the same age, and all this occurred right at that exact 2-year time frame. Surfing went from a little unknown fad to a nationwide craze, and it kind of all focused right here. And so because of that, and all the kids who were here, and the surfing, and a number of other things, including an amazing individual called Dick Tree, I hope our panelists will talk about in a little bit. Cocoa Beach became what was known as the small wave capital of the East Coast, and it was the center of all the competitive surfing that was happening on the East Coast, and kind of created Cocoa Beach to be what it is today. So I'm going to leave that at that point, and I'm going to let Tony take it over and lead the discussion, and we'll get into a little more fun stories about what happened here on the Space Coast.
Thank you, John. That's awesome. And I know, and just to kind of, because I know you mentioned Gidget, just to remind everybody, a lot of people don't realize that I'm trying to remember when the book came out. It was in the late 50s, but the movie, I think, came out in in the 60s, but the book was 59. So that really kind of got things going out there in California, and then, as John said, here as well. So I'm going to introduce the rest of our panel here. I'm going to start with Bob Freeman, and we've got some slides up there. There's handsome Bob right there. He's still looking pretty good, isn't he? Bob, do you really want me to tell me how old you are? I see you added your age on here. Bob is a young 71, still surfing, retired. U.S. State Department and Senior Ops Analyst. And in 1964, first began surfing off of North Carolina's Outer Banks. Holy smokes, that's a tough place to start. And then we found out that, yes, it is, because in 1966, he was actually rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard off North Carolina's Shackleford Banks during Hurricane Faith. Yeah. You know, our parents were always telling us, don't go surfing the hurricanes. Moved to Cocoa Beach to pursue a career with the space program and enjoy Florida's good waves and warm climate. Warmer than up North Carolina, I'm sure. From 1967 to 1970, test engineer for Rockwell at Kennedy Space Center. Launched Apollo's 8, 10, 12, and 14 moon missions, and enjoyed surfing Cocoa Beach after work and before night classes, sneaking in a little bit of surf when you have the chance, right? Bob surfed a lot of these popular local breaks for years, continues to surf, travels frequently, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Mexico, Hawaii. God, they all have surf. Coincidence. Won over 200 contests, surf contests. 1968 winner, Florida State Surfing Championship. 1996 finalist in the U.S. Surfing Championships in Hawaii. 2014 inducted in the Space Coast Sports Hall of Fame. 2015 winner of the World Legends Invitational in Puerto Rico. 2015 started Bob Freeman Surfing Scholarship. Great thing. 2002 to present is, if you read the Florida Today, which you all should, he is the surfing columnist there and lets us know when they're surf on the weekend. So thank you for that. He's happily married to Peggy, and he has 3 handsome sons. I'm sure they are. Next, Linda Grover. And we are so happy to have Linda here. I haven't seen you in a while, so it's good to see you here, Linda. So Linda, actually, now she's not that old, but she goes back to 1938 when her father started surfing at Jones Beach on a huge wooden rescue board, kind of like what we've been talking about. Working summer lifeguard. And a lot of people don't realize, but surfing, before we were all doing all these boards and building boards and surfboard construction and design is a whole nother 2-hour episode of surfing that you might find very interesting. There's a lot of cool history there, but a lot of the early surfers were lifeguards, started out, and then actually, on their paddling back in, they would stand up and surf. And that's kind of how a lot of the surfing got started here in the United States even. He heard about the Duke and surfed South Pacific and Hawaii during World War II, which a lot of U.S. surfing came from folks that were over there overseas and saw surfing and got involved and brought it back here to the mainland. Linda was 5 years old when she was introduced to the ocean, but in 1964, she learned the definition of the word stoked. That's a key term in surf technology. We traveled down the coast in her parents' Plymouth station wagon, and I can picture that. Windows all down, right? No air conditioning, I'm sure. To compete in the Labor Day surf contest, her first stop was a secret spot he had heard called Shark Pit. And that's a whole nother surf thing about the names of some of these cool breaks. Pulled up vacant stretch of beach and incredible shoulder-high sets and surfed with the boys until dark. And that's another story we're going to talk about a little bit today, is about females out there in the water in the old days. Great sets, dad on the beach, telephoto lens. one of her best surfing memories, and it made me want to make Shark Pit my home break. It still is our home break. In 1977, she got married to Dave, moved to your dream surf spot, and has been surfing there ever since. So I want to welcome Linda. We're gonna get you into that conversation here in a minute. And then next is Daryl Benton. And Daryl moved to Brevard in the summer of 1964. He was a paper boy. How many of us started out with paper routes? Good. We're in good company. And he used that money to purchase his first surfboard from Ron John Surf Shop in 1965. Now, most of us know about Ron John over here, but not everybody knows. They remember the old shop, but they don't remember the old shop, which was, I want to say, at 3rd Street in downtown Cocoa Beach, a little L-shaped strip shopping store right across from Slow and Low Barbecue now. And that's where Shut Up and Fish is today. And a lot of people don't know this. You probably know this, but before Ron DeMetta actually opened that shop, right at the stub end street at 3rd Street, had an old van, and he sold surfboards out of it before he actually got into that shop. Prior to that, he borrowed a surfboard. It was a Campbell surfboard, which is a killer collector right now. I wish I had one of those. That belonged to his sister's girlfriend, and a lot of us used to borrow boards from other folks and get to use them when we could, because most of us couldn't find a board our own. So he hitchhiked from Rockledge to the beach carrying the board, and that was pretty tough in those days. And you either had to get in a convertible or a pickup, and hitchhiking in those days, you did get hit. I don't know what's with Ritz crackers?
Throw food in.
Yeah, but I remember getting people tossing Ritz crackers at me when I was hitchhiking. So he surfed the pier and all those spots along 520 all the way down to Minuteman. And a lot of times back in those days, you could just drive up and down the beach until you saw a decent break and you'd stop and go surfing. Then graduated from school in '69, joined the Army in 1970, and on his very first day in Vietnam, went surfing there. That's a whole nother story, right, Daryl? He graduated, came home, continued to surf Cocoa Beach in college, went to FTU, UCF, class of '76, started a family, worked at the Space Center. Gee, there's a theme here. For a number of years, went to Saudi Arabia for 4 years, came home, went to work in the theme park business. He was manager of scheduling and planning for the very first Universal Studios park. Went on to work as project manager for Nassau Company, which is one of the largest themed entertainment companies in the world. Lived all around the country, in Europe, Caribbean. His son is surfing coach at Cocoa Beach High School. Go Beach. And own and operate the Ohana Surf School in Camp. I've met your son. I didn't realize that was him. Brother-in-law was the owner of Seeker Surfboards. That's another collector in the late 60s. His son, and now takes his granddaughter to surf every day. Cool. So with that, with those introductions, we're going to start some conversation. So we've talked about a few things up here, and just kind of like to, I'm going to throw some things out there. I know there's a bunch of different old surf shops, and I wrote down a few of those. We all know Quiet Flight, Natural Art, Ron John. I know Pat O'Hare had a surf shop in downtown Cocoa Beach, and is right next to the inner room, that little old building that's there. It's got like an old house, and I've seen photos of him there, and I know he had a partner. I can't remember who it was, but Rick James, right? There you go. And then, so there's, I know there's other old cool surf shops that I can't remember, but there's also, we were talking about all those beach breaks and, the goofy names that we've come up and where they came. And I know one, I remember, and I know it was called several things, but I was called it Disappear. And it's the old pier down in Patrick, but it had a couple of different names. And I know, I found out after I surfed there that it used to be a pier there because I wiped out once and just about got stabbed by a piece of rebar from that old pier. So with all that, I know there's some timelines here that we talked about a little bit, and I definitely want to get into female surfing, girls surfing out there in the 60s. So why don't we start with that and just talk about what was that like, Linda, back in those days? I know you had to be pretty gutsy to paddle out when there's like 20 guys out there, right?
Right.
Go ahead, let's use the microphone to help everybody out, especially for the video.
Most of the people that surfed in the 60s were guys. And so I grew up surfing with a lot of guys, and there was different styles. Going to the different contests, this was a big difference, is that the guys would have heats competing against each other, but there might be 20 heats of young men surfing together. With us girls, there was usually only 1 or 2 heats, so it was really easy to make the finals. So the 10 of us that pretty much surfed in the 60s up and down the coast would always be vying for first, second, or third. They never gave trophies to women in 4th, 5th, or 6th place like they do today. But it was a lot of fun surfing up and down the coast. My parents were really super supportive and drove us up and down the coast to surf. And we felt very self-confident. But in school, it was a different story because I was a surfer girl. And I was sitting next to girls with bouffant hairdos. And they were very different than me because I had long, usually wet, blonde hair. And we would always meet between classes to look at the surf because I went to Seabreeze High School in Daytona. And in between classes, we'd stand on a railing and we could check the surf. But I started noticing I was always the one in the middle with all these guys around me. And the girls were all snooting me because I was the surfer girl with all these friends and buddies that were surfers, which we probably all surfed together back in the day and didn't even know it. I know we must have.
Well, I know earlier, and I'm going to butt into your earlier conversation that you two were having, that you ended up at a Chum's surfing. Can you tell us that story, one of you?
You tell the story. You tell it better than me.
Thank you, Linda. How long ago was it? 10 years?
10. Maybe.
So we were young then, early
Yeah.
60s. Well, I was in the early 60s.
Well, I was,
You weren't.
almost approaching probably.
But Linda has a nice place in Hawaii, a nice little town near Honolulu, on the North Shore, where all the big waves are that you see in the movies. It's a big wave spot. And we surfed together one evening, a small evening, and then the next day we met at dawn, drove out and surfed this place called Chun's Reef, which is on Hawaii's North Shore. We pulled up and the waves were huge. It was big Hawaii surfing. Linda had brought the wrong board. She brought with her daughter's surf school board, which is a big, heavy, fat board to ride small waves for beginners. So she had the wrong equipment out there, but I was impressed with Linda because this big set of waves was coming in and we're all paddling out for our lives. And Linda swings the board around and drops in on this double overhead wave and makes the drop all the way down. All the guys are just screaming and she just rides it with ease all the way across almost Jocko's for the deep waters. And just nonchalantly paddles back out. No one got in her way the rest of the morning. Stayed out of her way because, and regarded as a Florida gal, what do we know about big waves? But that's the last time we surfed together, so we got to change that.
Yeah,
We come down your way and surf.
that's right.
Surf together.
So as you hear, once you surf, you always surf. And I'm going to ask you, Daryl, a little bit, because I know we all know this, but talk a little bit about, nowadays, you can go on the little magic box, the brain here, and tells you where and when the surf's coming, and you got all kinds of cameras. And the old days, we didn't have that stuff. We kind of became meteorologists and tracked down waves, and sometimes got burned and sometimes hit it pretty good. And of course, the old saying, you should have been here yesterday. But often we found waves. And talk about what that was like back then, traveling to go find a wave.
Well, one of the things we had going was, I think Ted Lund did a radio thing where he'd come on to be KKO or something and tell you how the waves were during the day. And the other thing was, is you were going across the causeway, there was always somebody letting you know if you should, go or not. And
They saw a surfboard on the top, they give you a thumbs up or a thumbs
And
down.
of course, the causeways and all the bridges that were, they opened, they weren't the high-rise bridges we have now. So you could get stuck sometimes trying to get to the beach for, an hour waiting for the bridge to open. Of course, Merritt Island, the firemen come out and sell you fried chicken and stuff there. My miscellaneous food item shop, actually. But it was an interesting time to grow up and go to the beach, because with the Space Center happening, and there was a lot of us, but then again, there wasn't a lot of us. It wasn't, it's what I told my son is, the reason why it's so crowded today is because back then our grandfathers weren't surfing with us. Nowadays, you got a grandfather out there, a father, you got some kids, you got grandkids. We created our own crowd. But consequently, what we used to do is move up down the beach and have your own little group kind of. And unless it was a really big day and you were at Shark Pit and everybody was parking in the sand, getting their cars stuck and everything else. But Shark Pit was a great place then, because you didn't have all that white water to pass through like you did.
Right.
Cocoa Beach.
So talk about that. We know about point breaks, but maybe everybody does. So maybe explain that versus a short break. But also, you mentioned Shark Pit. We know about the Monster Hole. Talk about some of the different breaks and what they were like and how some of those goofy names came about.
Yeah, it's funny. Second Light now in front of Patrick. There was a time when a couple of my buddies and I, we used to call that our spot. As if it was our spot. It was because we didn't want to tell anybody where it was, but it was our spot. And that became Second Light.
Which now is everybody's spot.
It's everybody's spot. It always was. But we didn't think that, we thought we was special. That's kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah. That's at Patrick Air Force Base.
That Air Force Base. I parked there once, when the old officers club was right there, and the parking lot was full, and I whipped into this one place, and a guy came up in a sports car and jumped out. He was a captain or something, and he said, "Well, hey, you can't park here, you're just a surfer." Well, actually, I just got out of the Army, so I knew he was a captain, but I said, "Yeah, I can park here." I said, "My dad, Colonel Benton, is here in the club if you want to go talk to him." And he's like, "Oh, no, I won't."
Full of rain.
I was actually just a little corporal. Oh, yeah. We had a lot of cool places. And I think it was up looking at some of Bob's stuff, surfing inside the channel at the dip. Talking about it earlier. And, the channel bottom was a lot different than it was those days when you had the northeast swell and a big drift. You could go and, of course, you could drive your car right up to the rocks at the edge and sit on the hood of your car. And when you wanted to go surfing, you just walked over the rocks, threw your board in, and jumped in after it. And inside the channel, you didn't have to worry with that drift. And the northeast wind waves would come in, and you could actually come toward the rocks and then back off into the middle of the channel
That
A
was
lot
a
of people. That's
point right there, basically, the way it's lined up. So the difference is, for anybody who's wondering, like, so a beach break oftentimes, just everything's coming straight on. A lot of times it closes out. Point break peels from either right or left and just peels down. And obviously that's the best way. That's why Sebastian Inlet is so popular, because it's really one of the premier waves anywhere, but especially on the East Coast, because it's such a or it used to be anyway, and now we're hopefully gonna get that jetty fixed so it'll work again, right?
Pretty deep in there now. I don't know that you can really surf there.
So tell us, Tom, I'm trying to remember, I know I always called it Disappear. What's the other name for where the old pier used to be? Patrick Pier, right?
Hangers.
Hangers, that's it.
Hangers.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was always thought of as the spot that the shark hung out at. Not Shark Pit. They named Shark Pit because they didn't want anybody to go there to surf.
I think Monster Hole kind of got that too, same reason, right?
Well, became peerless when the pier fell down. Hangars became hangarless when they tore the hangars down.
Right.
Boat club became no club when they tore that.
What you're probably getting from John is you can tell how long someone has been surfing the area based on what they know a spot's name to be.
Yep.
Such as Perkins and Lungs and all that. It changes, so.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember Magoo's?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering about that one. Where was that, and how did that one get named? Does anyone know?
Well, that's from my husband's history, and they used to have an Indian Harbor Beach Surf Club back in the 60s, probably around 64, and they used to have surf contests there. So do you know where exactly the location of Magoo's was? Was that Hamburger House? Or we had all these nicknames because we were 14, 15, 16 years old. We didn't know the real names for these surf spots, so we made up our imaginary names.
Surf spot was basically somewhere where you could park your car and get to the beach.
Yeah.
I get their car stuck.
Yeah, and with all the beach break up and down, really, other than, so typically, like for example, we're talking about names, so as the closer you go to Jetty Park in Cape Canaveral, typically the waves are smaller, depending on where they're coming, but typically they're smaller. If there's a really big storm surf coming in, everybody moves down what we call a kiddie pool, which is down at Cherry Down Park, or sometimes people call it, or Jetty Park, and then, you know, if you're really looking for the big waves and you're ready for that, you can move a little farther south and you'll get typically bigger waves, but sometimes they close out or it's too junky to actually get out on. So a lot of times people move south looking for those waves, but you can find waves up and down pretty much anywhere when it's surfing. And then so one thing that about Cocoa Beach generally is considered the East Coast surfing capital, and a lot of that's not necessarily we get the best waves, but we have the most consistent waves on a regular basis. And it just seems to, for whatever reason, that's one of the things I want to kind of talk about is everybody converged here in the 60s, Boardmaker, Matt O'Hare, and others, and we Dick Cattry and some of those old surf legends that ended up in this general area.
Part of that was because we always had warm water.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Florida surfers could paddle out in the morning and stay in the water all day long. And, you know, and come back in because you didn't get cold. You know, you get hypothermia like you did in California.
Right.
You have to wear a wetsuit and all this kind of stuff. In Florida, you could go, I've been surfing on Christmas Day without a wetsuit, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like surfing in a hot tub, especially in summertime when the water temps 79, 80, 81 degrees.
And it does make a big difference. I know my first time in California, the first time I went out there, I rented a board and I was out in San Francisco. I rented a board out at Ocean Beach and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. It hurts. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, so yeah, that does make a big
I
difference.
think it's a big deal. I know that I was the first time I went to California, which is someplace I always wanted to go in high school days, you know. But I paddled out on a surfboard with a wetsuit on, but I had no gloves and no footies, and my feet were numb. And as soon as I turned around to wait on a wave, this seal came out of the water. And I thought, my God, this is a hard again. Go back to Florida where there's turtles,
Well, I know a lot of this. I lived out there for a while, and I got used to nice surf. But they in that northern California called the what do they call it? The Devil's Triangle because of the great whites. And moved back to Florida, was thinking, well, at least we don't have great white sharks. Now they're going to bite you, they're not going to eat you. And then we've been reading about Catherine and all these great whites hanging around off of the coast here. So. Oh, well, when we see a shark fin, typically you just paddle in the middle of the back and don't tell anybody, right? You're not going to come in just because there's a little shark out there.
I was hearing some of the conversation about, it's topics like the golden era. And I think for us, Florida, a lot of that was the 60s.
Yeah,
surfing, there was surfing in the 30s and earlier and all. But that was a big time. As far as the girls surfing, there were big, heavy surfboards. There weren't very many small kids surfing either because the boards were just too big and heavy. They were hard to get to the beach. Like you said, had to have a station wagon, a truck, or convertible. And we surfers went through a lot too. We were told that we couldn't surf certain places. There was times when Patrick Air Base closed off surfing to surfers. So someone complained about someone threw trash in the parking lot.
Yep.
The pier shut down surfing for you and Wyatt, we helped restore surfing.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
They brought in lifeguards to protect the swimmers at the pier, but they restricted the surfing. And the thing is, the surfers have probably played a big part in rescuing people. They get sucked into the pier when the wind is blowing from side to side. And the tourists and swimmers just don't know better, and they get sucked into the pier. So we went down and argued the point and restored surfing to the pier. Before that, they would put up the big striped poles in Cocoa Beach. Remember those? And you couldn't surf between the poles.
Right. Or a certain time.
Yeah, so you're out surfing when you got cops on the beach. You could drive on the beach, then blowing the whistles at you to come in. I never did.
Yeah, surfers, in the 60s, I mean, to a degree, surfers were looked down on. We were like troublemakers, the bad boys, the bad girls. We weren't, it wasn't accepted. We were, in a kind of different category.
But we were very good at it.
Yeah, we weren't.
We were very discriminating against. I remember in the 10th grade, my teacher, my English teacher, at the beginning of the year, she said, okay, students, this year, if anyone in this class gets a published piece in a magazine or a newspaper, and their name's on it, you will get an A. So I'd been surfing for a few years, and I had a couple contests under my belt, so I decided I can do that. That'll be simple. So I wrote a few articles for Competition Surf, Surfer's Guide, and Eastern Surf Magazine and submitted them. My father kind of told me how to do that because he was a photographer. And I submitted them, bad spelling and all. And they accepted them, printed them in these 3 magazines. So at the end of the year, I'm banking on this is going to give me an A in this class. So I grabbed those magazines in my hand, walked into class, and the girls are all sneering at me, and the guys are going, how's the surf? And I'm going, I come up in front of the class, and I handed the teachers the magazines. I said, teacher, this is my A for this semester. And she scowled at me, grabbed the magazines, and I said, yes, I've written 3 articles for these 3 publications, and you said at the beginning of the year, I'm going to get an A. She took those magazines out of my hand in front of the entire class and tossed them in the waste paper basket. To this day, I haven't retrieved them. And I ended up with a C in the class and had to take the finals. So we were very discriminated against because we were the surfer kids that were
Yeah.
hanging out on the railing on the side of the.
Yeah, I remember my football coach told us, we could not surf or we'd be kicked off the team.
Right.
And it's tough. I mean, yeah, because I love both. And I remember I just kept my mouth shut and I wore, back then we didn't have sunscreen like we do now, we have zinc oxide. And I'd go out there and I'd be glowing white. It's like, I don't want to get any sun on me. I still went out there and surfed and I got to play football, but I just didn't say anything.
I offer a little counterpoint to that. I went to high school in Cocoa Beach High, and just to show you what the difference between Cocoa Beach and just about everywhere else. Cocoa Beach was known as the hippie school. And so it was a very small school. It still kind of is. It hasn't changed much. But it was probably the only high school out of probably the United States where all the guys had long hair. They wore flip-flops to school. The girls had all their little hippie scarf tops and mini skirts. And there were basically no rules. And everybody in the school surfed. So everybody surfed. So if there was waves, the school emptied out. And the football team wouldn't show up for football practice for the waves. That's, so it was a great school. And just to kind of emphasize how much different it was, even another point is that, Cocoa Beach was a center space program, so most of the people that came to live here were mostly white. And we had one black kid in our school, his name was Vance Gregg, and we voted him to be the senior class president.
Yeah, that's cool. Especially then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's different, and it still is kind of different. There's a unique history there. And I know I'm involved in Cocoa Beach High and some different things on the SAC and other things, but it's it kind of carries on that tradition. And I might just add that it's also one of the top ranked high schools, not just in the state, but in the country, still to this day. And half the school starts. So if there's surf, it's like classes, everybody shows up late and they're all wet and bedraggled and.
But half your parents are engineers also.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about some of the different historic folks that unfortunately, some of them we lost. Some of them are still here. I know, one of the more famous ones, just because of the surf teams and all that, and I'd like you to talk about it a little bit. It's like some of Dick Cattrey's time here and the surf teams. Dick Cattrey was probably one of the early on very famous surfers who went out to Hawaii. He was actually surfed out at Waimea, one of the early Waimea surfers, which is a big giant wave out there before anybody people, and I guess it was in the late 50s when people said you couldn't surf it, and they went out in the early 60s, I think it was, and actually went out there and surfed it. And he's one of the ones that went out, surfed it with Greg Noel and others, and then came back, opened up a surf shop, and had surf teams. And there was, I think it was a Hobie team for a while and some others. Y'all remember those? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'm sorry. I was pretty fortunate. I never consider myself a great surfer, but I was good enough surfer that Katrina
will do.
Katrina, I was riding for Hanson Surfboards, and Katrina brought me onto his Hobie team. So I'm only mentioning that because I got to travel with those guys, with Hobie. Would meet us at some contests, but I got to ride in the van with Katrina, Gary Proper, Lucy, and all these names that we all know that were the big studs back in the day. Most of them Cocoa Beach High grads too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got to pal around with them. I had the job at the Space Center then, so I missed out on a lot of trips and big contests. But the weekends, ones that where I could get a day or two off, I got to go with these guys and live with them on the road and surf contests with them and carry on. And yeah, a lot of carry on. it was interesting because we could pull up to a surf shop that would be sponsoring the contest and there'd be a crowd. There'd sometimes be over 100, 200 people waiting out in the street for us to arrive. And Gary Proper and Tabling and Lucy and those guys, Katrina, all signing autographs right away. And I just enjoyed being part of that. Amazing too, there was no internet emails back then, so.
Yeah, how the word get around, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just happened. Matter of fact, Katrina and I became good friends, stayed friends for years. And the most famous surfer from Florida would be Gary Proper before Kelly Slater. And so I got to know he and his brother real well. We even double dated and surfed together and all that.
And so talk about Gary a little bit. I mean, tell us about what he did and why he was so famous. And it wasn't just surfing, but I mean, he was also one of the early contest winners and kind of showed some of those West Coast boys and how to surf.
Gary had a very competitive nature. And I wouldn't want to play Gary Proper again Twin Weeks.
He had his own model, the GP model, with the Gary Proper model.
Yeah.
Clyde Coggins with Common Surf worked with the guys, CC Ryder. It was, these guys were Florida guys, but they had surfboards and things.
Gary was very aggressive in the water.
Yeah.
He was a very fast surfer, very fast paddler. He caught all the waves, and he was tough to surf with.
Yeah.
He was just all over the place. But he had a cocky self-assurance about him.
Arrogant.
Very arrogant.
You can say that, yeah, it's fun.
That's what we
You say it when
But
it's
he had the strut. Claudia was just very laid back and low-key. Claudia could have played professional baseball.
Yeah.
He was drafted by the
Very
Reds.
athletic.
Yeah, as a pitcher, and decided he wanted to surf instead. Two different styles. Gary, very fast, very aggressive. Claudia, slow, and very smooth style surfer.
And they carried that out throughout their life. I saw Gary just weeks before he died, and he still had that aggressive nature, and you still felt a little on edge when you talked to him.
Well, he was very type A, and he was always doing stuff. So in addition to that, a lot of people, I'm assuming, probably don't know, but he went on, he did the Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. He was an artist, did quite a few shows. At the Surf Museum, we did an exhibit, but also in addition to boards and other things, had his art in there, and it was pretty dark, but it was actually really good. I mean, I'm an artist and I run an art gallery, but it's up there kind of art, and he was very, very talented in many, many ways.
So during these golden years, I mentioned mostly the 60s and later 60s, those guys, Claudia, Gary, and Dick Katree, they made surfing in Florida's East Coast relevant. They got the attention, like you were saying, they went out to California and won big contests.
Yeah.
Went to Hawaii,
Shook 'em up out
beat the
there.
waves. Yeah. And so suddenly us guys in Florida especially, we were somebody.
Right.
Instead of
And
nobody.
that carried on with Kelly and
Chamberlain and
the Hopwoods and all.
It just kept going.
And so we've California doesn't like to admit it. They think they're the surfing, and honestly, they do have better waves. But I think a lot of our surfers were so good because we surf, the crappy waves so much. Well, we got good waves. We just excel on, give me a nice, 3 to 5 foot, clean wave every day. I'm probably a better surfer myself than these guys and gals who would just be out there on everything on every day.
That's why Dan and all of us here go places and surf, because we can still surf really pretty critical waves and still be from Florida, the small wave capital of the world.
Yeah.
Something I think everyone's kind of picking up on here is from us surfers, there's a vibe. And the thing with surfing, for those of you who have never surfed, it's just fun to play in the ocean. it's just fun to be on the beach and play in the ocean. So you put a surfboard out there that you can lay down on and glide and ride a wave all the way to the beach is fun. You have a surfboard that you can try to stand up on and ride all the way to the beach. That's even more fun. And then you feel an addiction coming on. You want to go back out and get another one. And then you find yourself checking the weather forecast for the weekend and thinking, it'd be fun to do. So we get hooked, obviously, and that just doesn't go away. And a lot of us that can't surf anymore because we just physically can't still remember the feelings of being out in the water and getting rolled around in a wave. And sometimes when you're surfing, there's dolphins out there with you. Sometimes in the same wave. Turtles. Yeah.
I've been out there and watched, one day it was just gray and winter day. There was nobody out at all. And it was like Victory at Sea, but it was small. It was just cold and choppy and gray and nasty. And I'm sitting out there just kind of zenning out a little bit. And all of a sudden next to me, just this big whale and scared the hell out of me. And it was a manatee and her calf popped up right next to me, and her eyes just went like that. My eyes went like that. She turned around, knocked me off my board, took off. I probably would have jumped off anyway, but in that right then, it just but you see that kind of stuff out there, and you see spinner sharks and stingrays and all kinds of stuff, and it's kind of cool out there, and there's nothing for me, and I know probably some of the youngsters would argue because they've never ridden a longboard, but for me, to just get up on the nose of a board and you don't see the board. You feel like you're sliding down this wave and, playing hood ornament, and it's just really cool. It's a great, great feeling. And so that's one of the things. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing a bunch of really successful surfers, not only in the water, but out of the water. But there's a lot of people, there's a community, especially around here, that have given up, for lack of a better term, who made a decision that surfing comes first and everything else comes second. That may seem kind of weird, but they made that decision, and we see them out in the water, and when you're out in the water, everybody's equal.
Right.
You're either a good surfer or you don't belong out there. So everybody's out there kind of doing their own thing, and it doesn't matter if, you just getting by and you surf every day, or you're, a well-known, professional engineer and you're out there surfing.
Surfing's driven our lives. I mean, all of our lives. I mean, it's driven, it's a passion, and it still sticks with us. I've surfed for 58 years. Steady, not stop. And yesterday was an outstanding day for me because I went to the beach and my family was there. And we paddled out, and we happened to be right south of Shark Pit, which is our beach now. We call it the Lane. There was 6 of us out there, just like that day in 1964. And my family was at the beach. My grandchildren, which I have 6 grandchildren, are all playing in the water with boogie boards. My neighbors are out surfing and smiling and having a wonderful time. There's a turtle coming up into the water and inviting us to be in the ocean with him. And surfing isn't just a sport. It's a feeling, it's a lifetime, it's a wonderful thing to be involved in. And even though we were persecuted as surfers back in the 60s, I thank God that we had the 60s and that we evolved into that we have a community of surfers here. And it's just wonderful to be here with you and find out about your professional careers, because I had no idea.
So I grew up in St. Petersburg, over on the other coast. And so a different perspective of Cocoa Beach. Every weekend, my buddies and I, we would, on usually on Friday night, we would drive over, end up pulling up to Jenny Park. Back in the old days, you just pull your car up, on the other side of the dunes. We'd walk over, we'd go to sleep and wake up and surf all day, take a little nap in the afternoon, surf a little bit more, and then drive back. And we would do that every weekend. And because of that, when I had the opportunity to move anywhere in Florida, I chose Cocoa Beach because I wanted to surf. Even when I lived in South Florida, every weekend I'd be trekking up here, still camping out in Jenny Park, but in the campground as I got older. And I had 1 week more vacation than my spouse, so I'd take a week and camp out in Jenny Park and come up here, and finally got the opportunity. I said, you know what, let's just move to Cocoa Beach. So I don't have to drive all the time. We did, and what a great thing to have done. And it got to get more at it, but you live your lifestyle, and you go to where your lifestyle is. And I think part of that is, one of the greatest honors, that we never get to enjoy is when we pass away, is what we do is the paddle off. And we've done those for folks. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about some of them, but historic surfer end of life thing is everybody goes out and, they may have a funeral or this or that, but they have a paddle out where everybody goes and paddles out, typically with your ashes or flowers or both, and get in a circle. And people say a few words and sprinkle your ashes and throw some flowers and catch a wave on the way back in. That's a pretty good way to go out in life, isn't it?
Not ready for that yet.
What's that?
Not ready for that yet.
Not ready. That's right, yeah. I'll paddle out some other folks' paddle outs, but not ready for mine yet.
May I make another comment about
Yes, please.
I don't think any of us realized that in those mid-60s and later 60s, the positive financial impact that surfing would have in Florida, and especially in Brevard County. Ron Johns alone, about 240 full-time employees, open 24 hours.
That's one of the largest employers in Cocoa Beach.
That's right. And constantly giving back to the community. The Surf Museum space is still donate that space, which is retail floor space, and that's a premium.
Yeah.
For those of you who know retail. But we had no idea. We were just surfing and trying to find boards and surf wax and time off to surf. But the impact and what the emergence of smaller surfboards. Now you have little kids surfing. If you can just throw a surfboard in a small car and go to the beach and
Throw your Toyota.
Right, more girls, surfing and all. And I've noticed too, a lot of guys in their 40s, 50s now learning to surf for the first time who have moved to the area. But I have no idea, I don't know if anyone knows, George, what the financial impact is on Brevard County from surfing. I'm sure there's some numbers around.
I know Ron John, I'm like 99% sure, is the largest private company employer in Brevard County. You've got government stuff, but private, I think they're one of the largest in just numbers. And then you've got dozens of smaller surf shops, but it's not just that. It's kind of surfing stuff where people go and they buy Hawaiian shirts or, and it just sort of affects the economy for tourism. People will come over here, maybe don't surf, but just want to come and kind of be part of that surfing sort of thing.
Tony mentioned the weekends, making that long drive.
Yeah.
Over.
Yeah.
When the surf is good, and now with better weather forecasting, the surf is going to be fun for a weekend. The hotels in Cocoa Beach are booked.
Yeah.
They're booked up.
The old farts like us, we don't camp on the beach in the dunes anymore. We stay in nice hotels and go out to eat, but we still get up and go surf.
The beach line is coming over from Central Florida is a steady stream of surfboards on cars.
Yeah.
And it's again, the financial impact, the shopping, the restaurants, the hotels, and all, it has a big impact on the community. So us surfers, we're kind of proud of that.
When you look at George and his surfing Santa at the Christmas party. And that, that is a mob of people.
That's thousands of people.
It's so cool because that is that whole surfing community. And,
Yeah.
and it's the day before Christmas.
And I know, working with the TVC and talking about that, that's one of the largest economic impacts in this community for an event. And so, and that's, again, it's surfing. It's Santa's, but it's all that whole kind of beach thing and everything.
That is Mr. Surfing Santa.
Yes.
George Trosser.
So what we're gonna do now is, we're gonna open it up to y'all for questions or comments, and and you can address them generally or to anybody specifically, but I see one right there. Yes?
You've been talking a lot about the boards. Would you discuss the development of how the boards have changed over the years? Because I understand the boards are really tiny and they were large.
Sure. Sure. No, that's a great thing. And actually, if I could just start, I love that part. I'm an engineer, so I love that part of history and what it was. And I've got at home, it's a Hawaiian board, but I've got, actually it's a California board that's been the Hawaiian back, but it's a 1950 10-foot solid balsa board. So that's the 50s. Prior to that, in the 30s, most of the boards were paddle boards, and they were kind of almost like boat construction. And I'm going to let you all talk about it, but the one thing I thought was funny was you were talking about your first, I think it was you, John, your first shortboard, right? 8.6? And so growing up in the 60s, most of us were riding 9.6, 9.5, 10, 10-foot boards. And I remember I had a surfboard Hawaii Model A, which had stringers. So you got a center stringer, but you got a kind of a V-shaped string. That's what it's called, Model A. 9.6. I think it was like 40 pounds. And I remember literally dragging it. It had like a flat spot on the hips, because I'd always have to drag it down to the beach and surfing that thing. And then shortboards came out. And so now this is over, again, in St. Pete, over by Treasure Island. We had a break, and you'd get a few months when you'd get some decent swells when the fronts would come through, and you had to be out there in that 3-hour window to get it, otherwise you'd lose it. But I remember I got a shortboard, and I was just struggling to figure out how to surf that thing for about 3 weeks. And over there's a bad short path, so I broke it, and I took it to Joe Nuzzo over at Sunto Surf Shop in Treasure Island, and to get it fixed. And he says, "Here, try this." And back then, what you said was a shortboard, we called mini takers, and they would take a longboard and they would literally just cut a couple of feet out of it, make an 8.6 or an 8.10, but it looked just like a longboard. And he said, "You'll have way more fun on this." And I got that thing, and I never went back to shortboards. I just kept getting bigger and bigger. And now I've got 9.6 and 10 foot, and I get on, make my one big turn and glide. But talk about a little bit more about all the different board shapes that came out over the years.
Well, I'll start with my dad's board. His board was probably 14 foot long, and was constructed out of a kind of a plywood hollow core. I think it took a couple people to even drag it down to the beach. And it was a rescue board. That's how they developed. And then from there, my first surfboards were 9'4", and they went on, and I surfed that for many years until 1968, when the shortboards took over the industry. And my first shortboard was 8'10". And then when I went out to Hawaii, I went to University of Hawaii, I ended up having to get a surfboard out there. And so I went on the classified ads to look for a surfboard. And I ended up with this green, speary looking board, which I had no idea of. And it was called a minigun. And it was like what they rode on the North Shore of Hawaii, where you see the big waves. And it was the skinny maybe 6-foot board that I'm riding these enormous waves on. I know why. And then I went through, back down to a 5-foot board when I came back to Florida. And then I eventually, I'm a real longboard person. We all, I think, longboard, but it's,
But that mini gun you're talking about, so the gun shape, so in the rear quarter of the board are the hips, and they made them long and narrow on some of those really fast, so they go faster, so especially on like Hawaiian waves, so you can get in and get down. You're not going to be doing a lot of turning, but you're just going to haul butt, and that's why they're like that. And then
they were thrill seekers.
and there's a lot of different theories on nose ridings. You've got downturn nose like an airplane wing for the lift. Others like a flat or a concave. And all these different. So there's a lot of engineering experimentation going on with surfboards throughout the years, right? More drag in the stern, in the tail to kind of hold you into the wave. And then they went in the 70s, into the short boards, the real short boards, and they ended up with everything from single fin, they went to double fin, they went to fish, and then
V-bottom.
V-bottoms.
V-bottom came out, that was kind of when they started getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah, the V-bottoms were just, I'm sorry, they were dogs.
They were awesome. I still have one.
But you were talking about your dad's first board, and we have one of the Whitman's boards at the surf shop. I mean, at the surf museum, and it's built with stringers on the inside, like boat construction, and it was kind of a plywood or veneer, and about like that thick and hollow inside. And then the balsa boards, I know Balsa Bill was building hollow balsa boards, which I don't know how the heck he did those things, but balsa boards are usually really heavy and very sought after, but he made hollow ones, which were much lighter. So a lot of different boards out there, and how they evolve, and a lot of experimentation. And then when the first started coming out with short boards, this is in the 70s, and it was kind of a cool Vietnam story in a way, because a lot of folks went off to Vietnam, their little brothers took their longboards and cut them in half and reblasted them and tried to make shortboards out of them. That's where the mini tankers were kind of started. So yeah.
That's how Cedar surfboard started. They cut them in half, the longboard. People couldn't afford it. They had a longboard, and all of a sudden everybody's getting shortboard, and they wanted to be like everybody else. They whack a chunk out, put some towels in there, put it back together, put some glass around it. Boom, had a short.
Maybe that's why surfers, so they went into engineering. We're always like, and even though we go to shops now probably, but a lot of us, our garages turned into surfboard shops. We did ding repair, we're tweaking boards, trying to build boards. It was kind of fun. So yeah.
On follow up on your question, the big thing was that you hear in the early days there were heavy wooden boards. And they weren't very maneuverable. You'd stand up and you could glide. Then they started using foam technology, a very high density foam, which is nothing like the styrofoam you see in coolers. Okay? This is a special high density foam that's built under pressure. And it comes out in a form or a block which you can sand and mold. And then you wrap it with fiberglass cloth and resin and you have a surfboard. So it's a lot lighter. By a wide margin, very buoyant, and we found that you could make them smaller than the big heavy boards, and then that really got things going, because now instead of gliding all the way to the beach straight, you could ride a board that started to feel a little more like a sports car or a little more like a skateboard, where you could actually do some fast turns and carves and things. And that was all part of the surfboard revolution. But that was the big thing, I think, wood to foam. And the experimentation that Tony's talking about was unbelievable. I think everybody ruined their parents' garages, paintbrushes, storage cans and all by trying to make their own surfboard or repurpose an old one in a garage. So everybody was being
Experimenting with
innovative on their own, weren't they?
Yes.
You know, people
Makes
coming
it
up with all kinds of
fiberglass.
ideas.
Another thing was the surfboard leash. Back
Oh,
in,
yeah.
back when we had these long boards, you know, I mean,
You
I
hung on
only
to
weigh
that
100
board.
pounds now, but back then I only weighed like 49 pounds, and my surfboard weighed 60. I didn't want to be attached to it. And, you know, when I fell off of it, it went on in with a wave. But as boards got shorter, then people realized that, you know, I can just have a cord on here and I don't have to swim in it. If I can remember days at Shark Pit in the 60s, you wipe out way out there and you swam all the way in.
Swim. Yep. And a lot of the younger surfers now, they don't ride like we did, because when we wiped out, you didn't just jump off your board or whatever. I mean, you hung on your board because you don't want to go swimming. So nowadays, yeah, and the leashes really made a big difference. A lot of the old timers don't use leashes. I use one just because I don't want to have to throw away the beach, because I have lost my board a few times. So what a difference that made. Yeah. Yeah.
I swam in the beach plenty. I don't have to use a leash.
Yes.
I've got three things I'd like to mention. One, some other surfing locations. Our favorite place was 8th Avenue in the Atlantic, because it was close and easy. But below Shark Pit was also the Flowing Well. And,
well,
Don't
yeah.
talk about that. That is a spot.
Secret spot.
Yeah, which was the last house before the event.
Yep.
Right.
And of course, the other thing, Tony, you came real close to, didn't quite mention it. My first board was a Greg Knoll 10-9. And you talked about being on the front of the board, not even seeing it. Well, the first time I hung 10 was really exciting for me to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's just an awesome feeling, isn't it?
Right.
And I'm sorry, but if you've never done it, I just don't know how you could articulate it to somebody.
Like being on the front of the Titanic.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
The last thing is, did any of you ever know or meet Murphy Surf?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've actually worked with them through the museum for years.
Okay.
And
Interacted with him quite a bit in later years.
quite an interesting character, famous surfer down in South Florida. Got involved in the diving. When I say diving, not like scuba diving, but doing diving shows in the old hotels and off the high boards, which was really popular in the 50s and 60s. And then kind of got caught up in some really exciting, crime, from waterside and really expensive homes and diamonds and jewelry and stuff, and ended up going to prison, but kind of turned around and got very involved in prison, like a prison chaplain, like visiting and counseling, but continued to surf and was very much involved with surfing, a lot of surfing.
Any inspiring novelist can start very well with Dick the Tree and Murphy Surf.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And Murphy Surf
novels
was
on themselves.
also an outstanding artist. He became quite the painter. I've actually had one of his pieces for a while. So yeah, just the characters in surfing, are just, really, really interesting. Like John said, you could write books about them, and people have, and there's still some that haven't been written yet. But you talked about Greg Knoll. Greg Knoll partnered with Pat O'Hare, who just passed away recently, Pat O'Hare surfboards. He was making Greg Knoll surfboards in that old building down by the downtown Cocoa Beach for years. And a lot of people don't know this, but Pat O'Hare not only was a famous surfer, but along with, I want to say, trying to remember who he was with out on the West Coast. I'm sorry, a little gray matter Snoopy today. But he was a wrestler, almost went to the Olympic wrestling team, and he was on there's a surfing wrestling Hall of Fame. And he's a member of that. And I'm trying to remember who he went to high school with out in California before he came here. I can't
Well,
think.
he learned to shape with Greg Nolan's factory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, out in California, and then he came out here and he started making great malt boards, and then started making his own.
Who's making boards in the area now?
There's a lot.
Yeah, it's just, that's another thing is that Cocoa Beach has always been and continues to be a center of surfboard manufacturing for the entire East Coast.
Well, I know Richie Ewan further south makes paddle boards and surfboards.
And there's
Ski Sharp's making
there's
boards,
a
and
long list. Ricky Carroll has got a
Ricky Carroll's got big, and they take them all up and down the East Coast from here. So that's another thing, we talk about economics, but huge economic thing.
One last thing, with that great novel, I learned real quick that when you're carrying a surfboard on a car, it could not stick out more than 18 inches in any direction. You get a ticket.
Yeah, cops are always looking for surfers for whatever reason.
Tony, I just want to say thanks for some of the best days of my life. I met you and Sean O'Hare at a surf rider protest in Clearwater Beach, and we're protesting illegal ship dumping.
Yep.
And I was not inspired to surf so much by surfing, but as y'all's passion for the ocean.
Well, thank you for saying that. I remember that being out there.
I went later that week and I bought a Brian Tudor fish from Tony over there at Suncoast, and I went down to Sunset with my shorts on and my belt, and I didn't even have board shorts. I had it on, it's junky and it's totally crappy. But the first wave I caught was down at the jetties in Bradenton Beach, and I was like, man, this is cool. And I started doing that drive. And then I had that opportunity to pick a place to live, and I picked St. Augustine.
Great place. Good surf.
Where there's still also a thriving surf culture. It's like, if you're in St. Pete with a surfboard in your car, people still think you're kind of weird. If you're riding around with a surfboard over here, everybody knows what you're doing, and nobody's wondering about it. And I really want to say thanks. And that's how I was introduced to pad sports, just because I had met Sean.
Yeah.
And I had no idea his lineage and his relationship to Mickey Dora, and I just didn't know any of that stuff. So thanks so much.
Well, you're welcome. And I remember that day. It was fun. And you remind me of a story, and I think we'll close on this if everybody's okay with that. It was actually in Surfer Journal, a magazine, but had great stories and awesome photos and stuff. And I remember it was a little short story about at Cowles Beach, just in from one of the big breaks out there, Santa Cruz. And it was the inside part, and it was like an old longboard wave. And this guy's out there surfing by himself, and his dad comes out with his son, and they paddle out there, and they're talking. It's his day, and he's just learning. He hasn't caught a wave yet. And the kid caught his first wave, and the other guy looks over him and goes, "Well, he'll never be president." With that, a bunch of old surfers here. We've actually proven that wrong because look at the success up here. But you've been a great audience. Thank you so much for letting us talk to the story here. And I think we've enjoyed it, hopefully as much as you have. I know we sure have. So again, thank you. Thank you all very much.
We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Erdman Automotive. Whether it is the Cadillac dealership in Merritt Island, the Toyota dealership, or Nissan dealership on State Road 520 in Cocoa, you are guaranteed to get the best deals from Erdman Automotive. New or pre-owned vehicles are in stock. The friendly staff are working hard to meet your every need. And the Erdman Automotive Service Department is second to none and will treat you like you want to be treated. That's Mike Erdman Nissan, Cadillac, and Toyota. Simply the best. Visit Planet Fitness of Rockledge, the judgment-free zone with over 80 cardio machines, an ab workout room, weights, and more. That's Planet Fitness on US 1 in Rockledge.
Hi, welcome to Scooters.
Visit Scooters Coffee in Rockledge on US 1, serving espresso, blenders, smoothies, and other delicious coffees. Breakfast is served all day long. That's Scooters Coffee on US 1 in Rockledge.
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I'm Janie. I'm Rayleigh. And you're watching the Friday Night Locker Room, live on Space Coast Daily TV. Back to Stephen Orville.
So there you have it from the Radisson Hotel at the port. Steve Wilson, Orville Susong in the Friday Night Locker Room on Space Coast Daily TV. Talking about surfing this morning, Steve. I found a lot of these stories very interesting.
Very interesting and very educational. Yeah, I learned a lot about surfing, and especially surfing back in the 60s primarily. But what a fun morning it's been. You know, we really didn't know what to expect when we showed up this morning, but I recognized some familiar faces on the panel and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, on our panel this morning, John Hughes, Daryl Benton, Linda Grover, Bob Freeman, and Tony Sasso. That was your panel this morning, and talked a lot about stuff, Steve, that I remember growing up in the 60s right here in Cocoa Beach. So it was rather interesting to hear some of those old stories.
Well, I grew up in New Orleans in the 60s, so I didn't do much surfing, but we did have Lake Pontchartrain close by. But we'd also like to give a shout out and thank you to George Trossett for helping set things up and coordinating things for the Friday Night Locker Room and Space Coast Daily TV to be here this morning.
And if the name sounds familiar, George Trossett, and you're trying to figure out where do I know that name from, he is the original founder of the Surfing Santas that puts a lot of people into Cocoa Beach in the area during Christmas time, and that's another story in itself.
Yeah, that really is. The program you've watched this morning is brought to you by the Florida Historical Society. They're the ones that put this thing together, and it's been just a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a great time here this morning. I want to thank everybody for watching. For Steve Wilson, I'm Orville Susong in the Friday Night Locker Room on Space Coast Daily TV, brought to you by Erdman Automotive.